Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk a bit on the poetic form sonnet. Sonnet, as you all know, is one of the dominant and everlasting genre in English literature. And sonnet as a genre has always stood the test of time. Right from the beginning itself, from Petrarch itself, from Yat and Surrey itself, we see that sonnet as a poetic form has been used by almost all of the writers in the whole of the literature. I mean, in the whole of English literature. Now, what is a sonnet? What do you call a sonnet? Now, sonnet, according to M.H. Abrams, you have M.H. Abrams here. This is the glossary of literary terms by M.H. Abrams, where he defines a sonnet as a lyric poem consisting of a single stanza of 14 iambic pentameter lines linked by an intricate rhyme scheme. So it is a lyric poem which consists of a single stanza of 14 lines, and it is written in iambic pentameter, and you do have an intricate rhyme scheme. Now this is the definition that I have taken from a glossary of literary terms by M.H. Abrams. Now, talking about the etymology or the very beginning of sonnet, sonnet as an art form has emerged in Italy, in Sicily and Provence, which is said to be the birthplace of sonnet. It was in 13th century Italy that you see that we for the first time saw this particular poetic form sonnet in the poems of Petrarch. Now, this particular word sonnet comes from the Italian word sonetto, which means a little sound or strain. Now, Italian sonnet, or you can call it Petrarchan sonnet, or you can call it classical sonnet. This particular sonnet form is called classical sonnet because it has been used by most of the countries. It has been emulated or modeled by so many other countries. That is why probably it is called classical sonnet. Now it is called Petrarchan sonnet because it was in Petrarch that we found it. Petrarch was actually a great practitioner of this kind of a sonnet. Now, what is the speciality of Petrarchan sonnet? We'll look into it later. Now, how did this particular sonnet form come to England as such? This particular sonnet form came to England through Yat and Surrey, through Thomas Yat and Henry Howard, who is the Earl of Surrey, in the early 16th century. Both of them, they were politicians, and after a diplomatic mission in Italy, they came back to England and wrote poems in this particular form just for pleasure. And what Surrey did was that, Earl of Surrey, Henry Howard did was that, he experimented with this Petrarchan art form and developed a new form, made slight changes to it and developed a new form which is called English sonnet, or you can also call it as Shakespearean sonnet after the great practitioner Shakespeare. Now, this particular sonnet has a difference from Petrarchan sonnet. We'll look into it. Now, what is the speciality of Petrarchan sonnet and what is the speciality of Shakespearean sonnet? Now, Petrarchan sonnet, of course, do have a thematic division as well as a structural division. Now, the structural division of both the Petrarchan sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet goes like this. In Petrarchan sonnet, both of them are 14-lined poems. 14-lined poems which express a single thought or feeling, and as in Petrarchan sonnet, we see that you have two divisions. You have an octave and a sestet. Now, what is an octave? Octave is a is a portion which does have 8 lines. It is a kind of a stanza which has 8 lines, and sestet is a stanza which has 6 lines. Now, This is the rhyme scheme of Petrarchan sonnet. As you can see, this is the rhyme scheme of Petrarchan sonnet. A, B, B, A, B, B, A, which constitute the octave. That means the first line rhyming with the fourth, fifth, and eighth, and the second line, that is B, rhymes with the third, sixth, and seventh. Now, you do have in the sestet, you can have variance in the sense sometimes it is C, D, E, C, D, E, or you can also have variance of it like C, D, C, C, D, C, D, C, or C, D, C, or you can also have C, D, C, D, C, D. So you can have these kinds of variants possible in sestet. Sometimes what happens is this Petrarchan sonnet, the octave is again divided into two portions. That is into two quatrains. You have four-lined quatrains there, and then you have a sestet over there. This sestet is again divided into three-lined portions, which is called tercets. So the speciality of Petrarchan sonnet is that after the octave, you have a pause. You have a pause which is called caesura, and then and the caesura is followed by a volta. A volta. Volta means a shift in thought. Shift in thought. Now here, what happens in the octave is that in the octave you have a statement of a problem. You have a statement of a problem or a situation or an incident, and in the sestet you have a resolution. So the problem is stated in the octave, and in the sestet you have a solution. Got it. Now moving on, and the lines are of course written in iambic pentameter. All the sonnetian lines are written in iambic pentameter. Now moving on to Shakespearean sonnet. Now what is the speciality? What are the changes that Earl of Surrey had made in this particular Petrarchan sonnet? Now in Shakespearean sonnet, Shakespeare was the great practitioner of this sonnet. That is why it is named after Shakespeare. Now in this Shakespearean sonnet, what happens is you have the division goes like this. You have three quatrains and a couplet, a concluding couplet. Now the first quatrain goes like this: A, B, A, B. This is the rhyme scheme that I am talking about. A, B, A, B. Then in the second quatrain, you have C, D, C, D. In the third quatrain, you have E, F, E, F. And in the fourth quatrain, you have, the fourth couplet, the concluding couplet, you have G, G. Now this is how the Shakespearean sonnet goes. Now you do have other varieties of sonnets which we will talk about later. Now these are the great practitioners of sonnet, right from Earl of Surrey or Thomas Yard or Petrarch. We see lots and lots of practitioners of sonnet in English literature. These are some of the practitioners that I would love to mention. You have Shakespeare. Shakespeare has, when we think about the topics which are used for writing sonnet, we see that almost all the subjects are welcome in sonnet, but we see Shakespeare has always taken up themes of love, beauty, time, art, etc., so as to describe in his sonnets. But John Donne has moved a bit far by shifting this particular theme onto a variety of religious themes, especially when you're looking at his holy sonnets, we see that. Now Milton, he wrote sonnets on a variety of subjects. He wrote sonnets on anything connected to human feeling and experience. Then of course you do see a bunch of sonneteers in the 19th century, like you have Wordsworth, you have Keats, you have Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Gabriel Rossetti, Christina Rossetti, etc. And when it comes to 20th century, you have great writers W.B. Yeats, W.H. Auden, you have Dylan Thomas, you have Robert Frost, etc. All these people using a sonnet form. Now, when we look at, now, of course, we need to describe Spenserian sonnet, which we would do later on. Now, what I want to talk about is, I would love to give you, what is it? I would love to give you an example for Petrarchan sonnet and an example for Shakespearean sonnet. Now, this particular poem, The World is Too Much With Us, which is written by William Wordsworth, could be taken as an example for Petrarchan sonnet. Now, what is the poem about? I'll just read out the poem and we'll just analyze it. The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours, we have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. This sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. Have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. Now, this is a poem written by William Wordsworth, and here he is using Petrarchan sonnet form. That means you have an octave and you have a sestet. Got it? Now, you have an octave A, B, B, A, B, B, A. Now you have a sestet C, D, C, D, C, D. Now that is the rhyme scheme of this particular sonnet. Now we have a problem which is stated in the octave, and we have a solution provided by the poet himself. Now this particular poem presents this fundamental problem of man being alienated from nature as a result of industrialization, as a result of material progress, and of course we see that this is a constant thematic concern in William Wordsworth, and he calls this material progress as a sordid boon. And he says that in the sestet portion, he says that we need to go back to nature, we need to turn back to nature as a solution, or rather he would love to be a pagan rather than becoming, or he would love to be a pagan instead of becoming a materialist in that sense. So the problem is that man is out of tune with nature, and the only solution that we can have is we need to go back to nature, we need to turn pagans so as to be in touch with nature. So this is an example for Petrarchan sonnet. Now moving on to a Shakespearean sonnet, I have taken Shakespeare's sonnet itself. Sonnet 30 of William Shakespeare. The sonnet is titled When to the Sessions of Sweet Silent Thought. Now I'll just read it out. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought, I summon up remembrance of things past. I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye, a news to flow, for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's song, sin's cancelled woe, and mourn the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances forgone, and heavily from woe to woe tell over the sad account of fore-bemoaned moan, which I knew pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored and sorrows end. Now, when we look at this particular poem, this is written in Shakespearean sonnet format or English sonnet format. We see A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Now, this is the particular rhyme scheme of this sonnet. And when we talk about this particular sonnet, we see that in the three quatrains, we have a problem stated, and in the concluding couplet, we have a solution. Now, what happens in this sonnet is, into the sessions of sweet thoughts, the poet is actually inviting up past things, and when he invites up past things, what happens is he is heaving a sigh of loss and grief. He is now grieving for those things. I mean, he is grieving at the expense of past, at the expense of those things which are dead and gone, those vanished sights, those cancelled woes, those grievances forgone, those forebemoaned moan. All these things he is actually grieving at. Now, this he is actually providing different angles of the woe that he is in. The woe is detailed from different perspectives in the three quatrains, and the whole of the problem is concluded in the final couplet, where when he thinks about the presence of his lover, dear friend, all the losses that he had in the past are restored, in the sense, or gets erased from him, and he is very blessed. Okay, now this is an example for Shakespearean sonnet. Now, these two poems could be taken as example for Petrarchan sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet. Now, let's look at another kind of sonnet, which is called Spenserian sonnet. I hope you are familiar with this particular term, Spenserian sonnet. Now, what is the speciality of Spenserian sonnet? And you know that Edmund Spenser, he is behind the formation of this particular sonnet. In Spenserian sonnet, when you look at Shakespearean sonnet, we see that in Shakespearean sonnet, you do not have an interconnectedness of the rhyme scheme. All the rhyme schemes stand apart from each other. I mean, it is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G. Now, in Spenserian sonnet, what Spenser has tried to create is, Spenser had tried to bring about an interconnectedness to the rhyme scheme. He wanted to connect the rhyme scheme all together. That is why he writes in this particular rhyme scheme, it is A, B, B, C, C, D, and E. Now, for that, I have taken an example, Amority. Amority is a famous sonnet sequence actually. We'll talk about sonnet sequence later on by Edmund Spenser. Now, this is Amority 75. Okay, now one day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrought it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. Vain man, said he, that does in vain essay a mortal thing so to immortalize. For I myself shall like to this decay, and eke my name be wiped out likewise. Not so, quoth I. Let baser things devise to die in death, but you shall live by fame. My verse, your virtues, shall eternize, and in the heavens write your glorious name. Where, when as death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live, and later life renew. Now, this is the particular sonnet. This is the sonnet that I would love to discuss on to talk about Spenserian sonnet. Now, this particular sonnet is about the power of love, the power of poetry, the power of art, etc. The power that art has. Man's life is obviously there is this lover who is writing names of the beloved on the waves, and it gets washed away, and the beloved is actually mocking the man by saying that why are you actually trying to immortalize a mortal thing? See, we all would be wiped away one day. We all are likely to be decayed one day. We all are to be forgotten one day. And what the poet, what the lover says is, of course, we would sometimes die, but I would, of course, eternalize you. I would make you immortal through my poetry, through my art, and probably death. When this is the concluding couplet where he says, when death would subdue the whole of the world, death cannot subdue us. Our love would live, and our life through my poems would live forever. So, this is Spenser in sonnet. So, you do have lots and lots of varieties of sonnet. And another thing that I would love to talk about is something called sonnet sequence, right? I hope you're familiar with that particular term, sonnet sequence or sonnet cycles. Now, what is a sonnet sequence or what is a sonnet cycle? It is a series of sonnets which are linked together, which explore various aspects of relationship, or sometimes it would be talking about the growth of a relationship or the development of a relationship, especially when the relationship is quite a complicate one. To give you some examples, you have Shakespearean sonnets, they are sonnet sequence. You have Philip Sidney's Astrophel and Stella, which is again a sonnet sequence. Spenser's Amority, which we were discussing. Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Sonnets from Portuguese. Then Dylan Thomas's Alterwise by Owl Night is another sonnet sequence. Derek Walcott's Tales of the Islands, that is also another sonnet sequence. Now, you do have different varieties of sonnets as well. You need not think that it is always 14 lines. No, there are writers who actually write poems, write sonnets using 16 lines. Still, it is known as sonnet. You have poets like George Meredith and Philip Sidney. Some of his poems, some of his sonnets has 16 lines. Okay, we also have another kind of sonnet which is developed by Gerald Manley Hopkins, which is called curtal sonnet, curtal, curtal sonnet, which comprises of 10 and a half lines. You can see Hopkins's Pied Beauty is an example for curtal sonnet. So it has got 10 and a half lines. So you need not fix on to 14 lines as such, but usually sonnets are written in 14 lines, but you do have different variations of it. So this is all what I wanted to talk to you about sonnet. Thank you all.